Righty-ho. Just a quick note, I've cleaned my water. I can be a bit of a bit naughty not cleaning my water regularly enough, but because these subjects are so tiny and we want these to be lovely and loose and clean, dirty water will mark, so it will give you a slight colour. So I've just cleaned those, in case you wonder why that looks it's got fresh water and fresh kitchen roll. Right, I'm going to start with number 3 bird, and let's work that way. Hopefully avoid me putting my hand in any of it. So we're going to be painting a little bit like the wing actually, and the edges. We're going to be painting the tail in, and then wetting. So it'd be easier if I just start, wouldn't it? So I'm going to just use the Soda Light Genuine for that. We're going to paint in the dark areas, so make sure these wings are definitely dry. We're just going to paint them in. I know, painting. Who knew I could just paint? And then we're going to come down. It's quite nice. Let me show you this quickly. If you can leave little white lines, it just gives it another sort of little bit more light, just a little bit of difference really. So let's try, and there's the beauty with this brush, it's got a lovely sort of tip to it. And it is tricky because these little subjects are quite small, so it would be quite nice if any of you are feeling brave is to paint these larger. Okay, now clean your brush, nice clean water, and we're going to wet down. We're going to start at the top, just so I don't want to start adding water at this stage, because that's still too wet. So if I start up here, one, it almost causes a little sort of a barrier if the water's here, it's acting as a slight barrier. As I wet here and start wetting all up here, it's encouraging it to draw up, just like the wings. So if I start at the top, I hope that kind of makes sense in my head anyway. So make sure you wet everything down, touch that wing, and we actually will on this one, we'll go in just slightly into that wing. If it bleeds, perfect. Just, as you can see on that reference photo, you can see some sort of the join of the wing. Let's come down now. Be a little bit of a judge. If it's sitting in a puddle at the moment, your little bit you've just painted on, hold fire. If not, I'll just have a little try. Yeah, that's all right. I kind of want a tiny little bit of a bleed, but not lots. So come down, see how it feels. It's going a little bit. Again, if it does run a little bit, you can always sort of soak it in. I'm just going to leave that tiny white line that I'm got a little join there. Yes, as I was saying, it would be interesting if somebody was to paint these a little larger. I did when I was trying it out, and you may have noticed. See, that's running quite a lot. Yeah, that was a little bit too wet, this paint here, but that's okay. Just push that down. Yes, I was doing 2 swallows. It just didn't look quite right. The beauty of these was the 3. But it would have given me the opportunity to paint them a little bit larger. So if you've got a nice larger piece of paper, it's worth a try. Right, a buff titanium, and I've got the Quadactrodome Deep Gold. We're just going to start adding that little bit of colour underneath the breast area. Now I think the UK swallows are almost white-chested, and I think stateside you have there, or if you're depending where you are, I think the American, I think what you call barn swallows have orangey chest, whereas UK ones here don't. They're white-chested. So if you're in the UK and you want to be very exact, then just add the tiny little bit of colour. Obviously if you're in the States and you want your swallow to look like a barn swallow, then add a little bit more orange. So we're just looking for, just to get that little bit of colour, a little bit of shadowing under the breast. If it's a little bit washed out, you want a little bit tiger's eye. Just a tiny hint, all very tiny. It's tiny little bits of paint. Mainly because they're tiny little subjects. And 2, it's just to keep everything wonderfully light. A little bit of tiger's eye, a little bit of orange just underneath that wing. I see I've got a little dry patch there. You can see that's running around. Little dry patch. Wet that down. Now I'm going to pop a little bit of salt in at this stage, actually, just before it dries, and I forget. Optional salt, you don't have to. You can do it on one bird and not the others. Just at least I've put one down before I forget. Right, put those down. I'm going to pick up the the Soda Light Genuine. I'm going to do that collar. Again, just have a little judge. If it looks very wet or you start putting it down, it's spreading too much, then hold fire, but that's about right. It's just giving me a little bit of a soft edge. Okay, don't overfiddle. Just put that down again, and we're going to pick up the orange. Make sure you brush, clean your brush, but make sure you take the excess moisture off, because you don't want to add too much water at this stage. If we add more water, it's all going to start swimming again. So we're wanting it to sort of dry so we get the right movement of paint. I'm actually going to pop it into that beak. Obviously the beak will be painted again in the black, but or the dark. We just want to get that little marking in there of orange. We want to reserve that white, so we don't want to put any colour in there. So it's just catching catching it at the right time. It's about perfect. Again, make sure you get those nice sweeps of the body. If it's run a little bit too much between that gap, you can just, with your brush, just gently sort of suck it up. A bit of salt there, it's not particularly helping. Fabulous. Again, take your brush away, have a little ponder. I might put a tiny bit more tiger's eye in there just to give that sense of darkness underneath and shadow. Yeah, I think that looks all right. Right, try not to fiddle. And we're going to do exactly the same with bird number 2. Let's pick up Soda Light Genuine. Keep my brush, and we're going to do a little bit of painting. Same again. There's a tiny little bit of body colour there, isn't there? Or blue, should I say, not body colour. And it's nice just to get that little sweeps, so you get left with a little white line. So we'll sweep down one of those tails as well. So be bold with that movement. Coming up. It feels weird to be painting. So let's get a little bit of tiger's eye as well in this bit. I'm going to wet down. And just wet that down. There's a nice lump of light there on the side, which I've kind of destroyed, which I can take out in a minute. But have a look at that reference photo. There's a nice sort of light on that right hand edge, and then a darker area just sits in there. Again, get the sweep right. Come down with that tail. Fab. Let's see if I can get that out. Right, it's still wet. It's just wetting my brush, taking the water off, and just sucking the colour up, and see how that's lifted. Again, I'm going to try not to fiddle, because all that granulating paint just moving around will give it a lovely sort of sense. And again, make sure you get that body shape right. Same again, we shall wet down the body, and then probably won't will I go, yeah, let's go a little bit into that body. It hasn't really sort of shown that I've gone in there, has it, on that one? But again, if you've got a very obvious sort of V there of, you know, we were wet into there, then don't do it on this one. Have a little look. And you're coming down, wetting the body. I'm going to be a bit more careful down here. So I'm touching that, seeing how it feels. The risk is if you don't join them up, you forget, and then you end up with a little white line. So I'm actually going to touch that tail colour now. And that's worked out fine. It's just given me, you see, that's just given a little bit of shadow underneath. Make sure it's all wet, and you can sort of, if you duck your head up and down, you'll see if you've got any dry patches. Ideally you don't want any dry patches. And we will go back. They are literally the same technique in each one. So if I pick up the right colours, that would help. We want the gold and the buff. And just again underneath the chest. You can do one bird a lot lighter than the other just to break those up, so that's always an option for you, just to change the character of each bird. Let's go this one a little lighter, a little more European. You can see my colours run again here, just a bit too soon. Easy, push it back, and again just take the brush away. It's almost better to have that bleed to keep it lovely and soft than it is to let it dry and have a hard line, personally. Alright, let's go back. The So Light Genuine. Again, be a little bit of judge if this is very wet. It's a bit of tiger's eye as well. Let's mix it up a bit. It's just nice to do something different for me with each bird, even though they're the same patterning, the same bird. It's just nice to do something different. See, that's too much, too wet, went too soon. So you can easily push it back, but that's what I mean. You just need to look at your own piece really and see how wet that is, and whether that's the right time to add the paint. And obviously they will have their own character. If I'd put probably just no, they both spread, these two actually, but if I had, say, sepia, it wouldn't have moved as much, so you get to know your own character of your own paints as well. But actually, when I take my brush away, I like that. Sometimes you just have to go with the flow, as they say. And a little bit of tiger's eye underneath the wing. Always add a little bit of the orange as well to break that up. Go pop a little bit of the orange into that wing, that sort of wing joint. Yeah, it's just after them being a little different than one another. I like what that's done. I don't sure there. It's probably just a little bit drier there for some reason. I think I wet it all down. But some days it's just nice to allow things to happen. Right, I'm going to leave that body bit. I'm not going to put any salt on that, but again, if you haven't salted, your first bird, or your third bird actually, you can pop some on the second one and put that down, but I won't do any salt on that one. And on with the orange, I'm going to make this one a little more orangey, I think. Just going to go into that beak. Just be careful you get that right shape of the beak. Push some of that back, because obviously it's a white section here, isn't it? So sometimes you have to sort of stand there and watch how the paint moves, but that's, yeah, I think that looks pretty. If I look away from it, that's nice. Just make sure it doesn't keep spreading. Fab. Right, exactly the same again. So Light Genuine, and we're going to paint. So be mindful of getting the sweep right and the shapes right. Coming down. So try and leave some of that just little white lines. It helps break everything up, I think. We're coming underneath. Let's get a little tiger's eye there. Clean my brush, take the excess moisture off. So when you say they're tiny little subjects, and if that was a bigger subject, you want to have lots of water on your brush, but as there is not a lot of room for the paint to go in, we don't want to add too much water either. So again, a little bit of So Light Genuine on my brush and do a nice sweep down. These sweeps are the scariest, isn't it? Because you've got one shot at it. Yes, try and keep that lovely. If you're a little unsure, practice on a little bit of scrap of paper. It's just a wrist movement really, so you just put it and sweep down. It helps to rest your hand on the piece of paper. Sometimes that gives you a little bit more security. Let's join up that, sorry, floating those in the air. Yeah, that looks all right. Let's just tidy my top edge up a little bit there. And get to it too liney. Yep, that looks great. Okay, I'm not going to go into the wing on this one because I'm just crazy. I'm going to go right along that joint, but you want to touch the wing joints just to stop them looking too sectiony. You should get just a tiny little bit of a bleed. Again, just wet that entire bird down. If it does help to put a little bit of colour, you can't quite see what you're doing, you can always put a little bit of buff or something there, just so you can see, make sure you've got the shape of that body right, the swing. See how that is. If we touch that, yeah, it's a bit too soon there. I need to allow that to dry a fraction. How's that going? Not too bad. It's probably going to. That's all right. Okay, again, same thing. I'm going to put a little bit more colour. Just again, it's just to sort of break up just to stop them all looking the same sort of. Yeah, you don't want to be too regimented, so I'm going to put a little bit more colour down, a little bit lower than I did on the other two. And if I'm still fiddling around putting colour down and you like what you've got, I know I probably say this on a few classes, but just stop. Just because I'm sort of fiddling away, then yeah, stop if you like what you've got. Just a tiny bit of colour under that wing. Got a tiny gap there. Make sure that goes up and right, butts up against the wing. Yeah, I like how that's moving. I think this is quite wet here, so if I put that Sodalite Genuine there for that sort of collar of colour a bit too soon, I'm just going to have to be patient for a minute and allow it to just go off a little bit. This is the trouble, when you're waiting for something to dry, you just want to keep fiddling, and I need to stop. Okay, let's see how we go. Right, if I clean my brush and I make sure my brush is probably drier than it normally would be, and make sure there's not a sort of wet sort of bobble there, so I'm getting a nice concentration of paint there, so it's quite sticky. That will help things not move as much. Yeah, that's not bad. So it's me just desperate to get on. Once you get going, you don't want to stop, do you? That's done all right, actually. Same thing applies. Just if your brush is quite dry and your paint is quite sort of sticky, then it won't move so much. Vice versa, your brush is really wet and you've got a really watery sort of paint, then it will spread more. Yeah, that's all right, actually. I'm gonna leave it at that. Right, clean my brush. Same sort of thing. I don't want to be adding too much water. It's just because it's we're working very small. It does working small, although it feels more comfortable and feels like it'd be easier. Sometimes it's harder because you've got such a tiny sort of surface to be working on. Oh, that's spread too much. I'm chattering away, concentrating. So yes, it can almost be harder to paint very small, especially on your eyes. It's a lot of squinting, isn't it? Very small pieces. Touch of a tiger's eye underneath. It's a tiny bit. And if it does form sort of a really lovely pattern, but it's outside that penciled mark you put in, don't worry. As long as it just gives you something pleasing, it's better to do that than to sort of keep manoeuvring it around to the correct place that you've penciled in. But if it's giving you a nice shape, then it's nicer for just to keep that sort of lovely sort of flow and marks. But spreading a little bit too much. Again, it's always just worth taking your brush away, having a little look. That's done all right, I think. And really, at this stage, they just need to dry now, and not fiddle. Right, I'm going to put my brush down because they are drying lovely, and I've done enough. I say it's a really critical not to sort of fiddle with these. I think it's partly, like I say, it's the tiny little subjects. You don't have a lot of room for error, and it's just to keep, because these birds are so light and ethereal, aren't they? They need to be kept very simple, I think. Right, yes, just allow these to dry, and then we can finish off we can do the heads then.